On to our last speaker, Ariana, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ariana Collura. Oh, there we go. I'm representing Trinity College, Dublin, and today I'm going to be talking about the potential for rainwater harvesting in Dublin to reduce the daily water. So what's on tap for today, mind the pun? We're going to be looking into my research question of potential for rainwater, talk about the background, a bit coming up with Irish water, might get a tad political, look into the methods and what I've done so far and the future stuff. So my research question stems into two sort of sectors. Firstly, is rainwater harvesting feasible for domestic toilet schemes in Dublin in terms of environmental, financial, and social and political reasoning? And also, due to the current water crisis that's been going on in Ireland, does this provide a suitable alternative as opposed to the Shannon Pipeline? For those of you who aren't familiar, I'll explain that. So, just a little summary on where our water comes from. So basically, you have water resources. For us, most of the water is from the River Liffey. So we take those reservoir, borehole, and river water, we take it to a water treatment plant, where we can treat it to a certain quality. For example, you need to treat drinking water to a large quality for many health and safety reasons. After the treatment works, that gets distributed, and then we can use it residentially, use it in industry, and leakage, actually in Ireland, you'll hear the speaker a fair bit through his presentation, but pipe leakage is about 40 to 50% of water loss in Ireland and Dublin. So you have all of that water coming out, and then that comes back to a wastewater treatment plant, back to the river, and the cycle continues on. So, the Shannon Pipeline Project is proposed by Irish Water, and it's for Dublin and the Midlands. Basically, they're claiming that there will be a rise in population from 1.52 million people to about 2.15 million by 2050, so about 40 years. And they're saying that right now, we have 550 megaliters of water pumped into Dublin every single day. At maximum capacity, 620. They're saying by 2050, we need 330 million more liters. That's 125 Olympic-sized swimming pools every single day that needs to be pumped in. So that's added on to the 550. So we're looking at about 900 megaliters every single day. They're saying that this project should began in the River Shannon area, the Partee Basin, abstracted with a 170-kilometer pipeline running all the way across Ireland, and it will terminate in Dublin and Piedmont with treatment plants there. It's going to cost almost $1 billion currently, and it's not even in construction yet. It'll bring about 1,000 jobs. 500 landowners will be affected by ripping up the land. They feel that they need to start this project by 2020 with a construction finish period of 2024, so 4 years. And the water is pumped at 4,000 liters a second out of the river, and Irish Water is claiming to account for this loss. So, this is the figure that Irish Water is using to say that this is a valid need, that we need 330 megaliters a day additionally based on the population. There are a few numbers that are very interesting to me in this graph. First of all, it's just a reminder that's saying we're going from 583 megaliters to about 900 by 2050. They're claiming that the leakage reduction, which right now they're saying 40% leakage, is going to decrease. They're going to work on the pipes, and it's going to be 19.4, yet we're still going to need all this water. My other argument is, if we have pipe leakage accounting for 50% of our loss, why are we making another pipe that goes all the way across Ireland? That pipe is going to leak as well, and we're going to have to treat it. It's not as much of a long-term, in my opinion, solution beyond these 40 years. Additionally, it claimed that, so the second circle is is water usage per home. They're claiming that it will go from average 365 liters a day down to 305. But if you do the math, based on how many people they're assuming will be living in a home on average, they're projecting that water usage per person will increase. And this is questionable to me because of all of the sustainable technology, all of the education that we are coming about with collecting, saving, using less water, dual flush toilets, etc., etc. So I also was fascinated in this number that they're using for consumption per connection. Because to me, it's just looking at one average number, saying a home uses this much water, and looking at that for a population of 1.5 million people. I think we need to look at this number a little more precisely. So, just some general objections against the pipeline. Obviously, people in Irish politics say no. Stakeholders have a very important opinion against water crisis, charges, pipeline. A large amount of it comes from the land, saying they do not want to rip up this land. A lot of people also feel water is a natural resource. Water comes from the sky. It rains here all of the time. Why do we have to pay for it? That might be valid, but we're not using it. So you do, that's correct, you do have this water, but we're still relying on these pipelines for drinking water. Pipe leakage up to 50%, and estimated daily water demand are other things that we need to look into account. So for the daily water demand, residential was a very large contribution to the water demand. But we're not looking at the water quality. All of this water that we are pumping in is being treated to drinking water quality. But are we drinking all of that water? The answer may surprise you. So, for domestic water consumption in Ireland and a home on average, if you look at this pie chart, only 3% of water used in residential homes are for drinking water. And 3% of water used in a home is for cooking. So that's about 6% mandatory, no question, has to be drinking water quality. Look at that dark blue. 27%, which is almost a third of the water being pumped into your home, is for toilet flushing alone. That's literally flushing a third of your water down the toilet that is being rushed in through these pipes, which causes extra pipe leakage because as your demand increases, you pump more water through a pipe. The pipes are old, they can't handle the pressure, and they leak. 38% is for showering and bathing. So looking at those two factors, which are not drinking water quality needs, over half of the amount of water being pumped through all these homes. I also observed water meter reports, which Irish Water claims is the most accurate representation of water usage. And if you observe the numbers here, it says that the average amount of water used by one person is 152 liters a day, which is fairly similar to the figure shown in that original table I showed. But what you need to note here is that as you have increasing amount of people who live in a home, water usage per person actually goes down because you're sharing those sources. So for 2 occupants in a home, per person uses 127. 4 people in a home is 91. So we need to observe this as well as how many occupancy per homes do we have in Dublin. According to the same water consumption reports, this is taken straight from the census. We have 25% of people living in a 1 occupancy home. So taking that 152, that only represents 25% of all homes per person. So we need to look at water consumption per person, as well as water consumption based on how many of these 3 people homes are in Dublin, how many of the 2 people homes, to get a more accurate number. So my proposed solution is doing this through rainwater harvesting. So just some little stats about toilet water flushing usage. A modern toilet uses about 6 liters of flush. Older toilets can go up to 15. So let's say on average you have 8 liters of flush. You flush 5 times per day. It's 40 liters per person per day. It's being flushed down the toilet. Remember, 1 person in a home had 150. Take that off. It's a very large difference. Water-saving toilets use about 2 to 4, 3 to 5 liters per flush. So some rainwater data that we can observe to see how valid this is. In the east, it rains, as you may know, about 1,000 millimeters every single year. In the west, a little bit higher, 1,250. And basically for a rainwater harvesting system, as you can see in the sort of cartoon graph or chart that I showed, you collect the rainwater that comes down from the roof and you put it in a basin or a storage tank and you use a pump and you pump that water throughout. So the roof runoff collection coefficient is just saying how much of this rainwater can we actually collect due to losses. 80 to 90% accuracy. So, what I have done here is basically try and recreate that chart I showed you in the beginning, just as a sort of basic standard to see how much water we're actually using. So what I observed, I looked at the number of people in a house, I looked at how many of those types of homes we have, I used those water per person figures, obliging with the CER reports, and I used this census information that Irish Water used as well, how many homes there are. And I determined that in 2011, we have way lower figure. 2015, 2016, I'm getting that you have 155 versus the 216. And in 2050, 253 milliliters a day versus 313. But what's more interesting is to incorporate rainwater. So as you recall, which I said before, rainwater harvesting for toilet steams, 27% per residential home, is domestic consumption, so only per home. So if we can save 27% of that water, that's what you see in that third line there across. 2011, it goes 100 megaliters down a day. 2050, we're looking at 185 megaliters per day, which is still less than 2011 original projections. Just as an aside, I just calculated a little theory to say, what if you can argue that you can only install these systems into new homes? So I observed the increased population from 2016 when I started this to 2050, and you would still have only 220 megaliters a day, which is very similar to the 2011 statistic. So I had to prove, basically, that this was a valid assumption. It's saying, okay, you can collect the 27%, but based on Irish standards and weather data, can you actually obtain that water? So I observed 27%, the coefficient, how much it rains here per year, and I also used the number of homes and calculated water demand. So you need to prove that the water that you collect can surpass the demand in order for this to work. And it did. I observed that you can capture about 2 times the amount that you need in all cases, even when looking at Irish Water's water demands. And additionally, I started observing the storage needs for a tank, which also were in line with these numbers. So the next step that I'm currently observing is getting a little more specific. So basically, in those numbers where I proved going back, I observed this based on 75 meters squared, the average roof size to collect the water. So in this case, I'm observing 2 different scenarios. This that you see here is a 2-person home on average, 75 meters squared for the roof. And this is supply versus demand. Basically, the supply has to surpass the demand for this to work. Supply being the orange line. And in most cases, it does. This is based on days in a year, and the amount of rainwater that comes down based on actual weather reports, and also observing how much you can collect. So this is saying as well, as in the case of 2.6 people with a 90 meter square roof, that supply generally meets demand here. There's some questionable figures in 2015, perhaps due to a rain shortage, but we also have these storage tanks. So this is something that I need to look more into going forward. And this is just showing the cumulative comparison, supply versus demand for those 2 scenarios that I previously showed. So So there's much to do with this. Basically, I have this summer to observe more data about different house size areas, types of roof catchments, average based on per home occupancy. Observing more, currently doing research about tank size, storage, failure rates. I want to recreate that Shannon Pipeline table exactly to show that it can possibly be valid that we don't need this pipeline. Creating a community engagement plan is very important here because there's much opposition to any water-related issue in Ireland. Upcoming, I have to observe climate change and carbon emissions in these systems, observe the payback period. So another argument can be, why would you invest $1 million in a pipeline that can possibly leak when you can have an infinite source of water coming in and recycling through your system? Additionally, leakage won't be as big of a problem because you know where it's coming from because the source is literally in your home. So that's something to observe in terms of payback. Applying water conservation and seeing how that will affect water usage in the home, and looking at how to install these systems, and probably more. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's go to Ariana now. So, there are loads of questions here. So you said pipe leakage is a 40-50%. Well, how much is the total leakage in the system?
The issue with pipe leakage in Ireland is that there's a lot of pipe leakage throughout various parts of the system. So some things can be sourced. They actually had the free first fix method, where it depended on the scenario if you were to pay whether the pipe leakage was in or out of the home. So the issue with all of these various pipe connections is that you don't know where they're coming from or how many there are. It's hard to source and fix all the pipe leakages because it's such a routed system. But the thing is, the pipes are very old and the water demand is getting higher. So the leakage is only increasing and people aren't getting as much water out as will go into the system.
Yeah. So my wife works in planning department of the council. And so she heard a story recently of they were replacing pipes in Dublin, and they found one section that was still a wooden pipe from probably the 1700s, still in active use. As part of the system. So there's some reasonably old system here.
These are the things you're dealing with. Yes.
And the engineer said that the wood was not a problem because it fossilized. It's the later Victorian iron pipes where they grow, they leak more. So the wood is good. This is crazy, I thought. When you were talking about those projections for the water use that will be, or water that will be required for Dublin in the future, do they take into account climate change impacts or anything?
They have a bunch of tolerances in there that they add on with pipe leakage and etc. I was only looking at the residential use, so my plan is I can't delve too much into those numbers, but I can to the point where they account for things that have to do with their piping system. And I don't believe they are, because if you do the math correctly, they're saying that water usage per person will increase, but water usage per household will decrease.
Right.
So if you're saying that I'm going to use, as a human being, I'm going to use more water per person in 2050, that's not having any hope for sustainability in the future. It's not taking into account any technologies, so I don't believe that it's taking into account climate change or any other parameters than the numbers they have for just water usage.
That's amazing, because there's been so much work done with regional climate models to try and project for decades now this very question of how much rainfall we would have. And it seems that last time it might go up on average, but it'll be much more variable.
It's probably something that I will have to consider more into my projections, because they're looking at the census in terms of population increase. They're not looking at rainwater yet.
So what's driving the push for this pipe if it's not actually, doesn't seem to actually make sense?
It's bizarre to me, because they're basically looking at the population increase. That, I think, is the main driving factor. They're saying pipe leakage is an issue, water is an issue, population is going to rise from 1.5 to 2.1 million. People can argue that. That's not my thesis to deal with. It's more the water usage per person. They're claiming that they're going to, I guess, run out of water. So it's kind of unfortunate that we're making such a short-term solution because we're losing water due to pipe leakage. So if you think about it, if you increase the amount of people by such a substantial amount, what happens in 2075? You know, as your demand increases and the people increase, you're just going to build another pipeline. Like, when is it going to stop? You know, so I mean, I'm guessing that financial incentive is large. It's going to be $1 billion project estimated already, and then you're going to have to fix the system. I mean, it's not going to be infinite. You know, so I think maybe job projection, stimulate the economy. Another thing to even talk about is tourism. I feel like tourism drives a lot of things in Ireland. I don't think tourists are going to love 4-year dig throughout Ireland on their tour. But if you install these residential systems, invest in that instead, encourage local jobs, not as much construction, but you still get jobs and money.
Yeah, please.
I just wanted to ask you two things. One, in your figures, was there any comparison between where people were paying for water or thought they were going to pay for water and they didn't? Because you notice in France where people pay for water, if you leave the tap running for a second, oh, everyone's freaking out, they're turning off the tap, they don't want you to stay in the shower. And when they even talked about water meters there, everyone was going, oh, you know, I'm kicking the kids out of the shower. And so if water meters were actually working properly, where you've got a reduced fee if you use less water, there's been no projection. Because I know myself, you know, it's human nature. If you know you're paying for it, you're that bit more careful. And also, if you had the tank or the water barrel, which I thought of myself, just having one, or just having a hose, but then if you get a huge amount of flooding, which we do get, what about your tank? I mean, there was some days last winter, I don't know how much fell, but like my bucket out in the back was like full.
Yeah.
So you'd have to have some sort of system in your tank so it wasn't flooding, wouldn't you?
Yes. So going back to the first thing, then I'll answer the second. So while I didn't use calculated differences between people who knew the water meter information that I was using were current meter data, so it was the meter. However, what's significant to note is that, as you said in the beginning, people use less water because the water becomes their problem and their understanding to pay for the resource. So it does initially go down, but in time there's a steady increase because people kind of get over it and, you know, little by little it adds back up to the system. But that's something that's also interesting. If you make people accountable for how much they're wasting, then there's an initial at least incentive to conserve more. But the thing is, in time, that demand does increase. So those are kind of, I guess, sort of social parameters, financial parameters that I wish to incorporate. The second thing was with the storage tank. I have to look at, basically, if you're flushing the toilet, there's only a certain amount of water that you would need to store versus how much you need to collect. So when you deal with that cap of, all right, I have too much water, or my tank can't hold this much, possibly maybe there could be a collection system that collects like a community of rainwater, or maybe we can recycle it in other ways. It's kind of, those are parameters I can't look at until I can figure out a retrofit versus a new system. So those are definitely very important things that I need to incorporate in.
Please.
Thanks for your presentation, Ariana. I was kind of shocked at the increase in water consumption, particularly because it's been large changes in the last 15 years in terms of domestic appliances, using electricity, less water in our washing machine, different programs and functions. I'm sure by kind of 2050, 2060, our household appliances, we would hope, will become more advanced, to become more water conservation friendly. So how can we be going the wrong way in the Irish water projection?
Exactly. The only thing I could possibly think of is things of high leakage. But they're saying that that's going to go down. So, I mean, it's just not, it's not the future. And it's also a shame. I mean, we have this rainwater 1,000 millimeters a year. Why wouldn't we just use that and loop it, make Dublin kind of mecca for sustainable water solutions? I mean, I don't see the con in investing in a system like this. I actually have a meeting with a guy from RPS who is sort of for the pipeline, and he has a more, his spin on it is environmentally friendly, but it's also financial from a business standpoint. So I'm bringing my argument into him to see what those shortcomings are, what is the reasoning, how realistic can we be? Because obviously everyone wants to say, we're going to be sustainable, we're going to reduce our water usage, but maybe they're looking at a more realistic approach. But generally, I agree with you that the water usage can only go down at some point.
And the point in most came up with the washing machine that even will wash your clothes without water. That's there. It's upcoming and it's already being implemented. And major problems for your pipe leakage is called as a water handling concept. And because if you have the control of blocking the water in your house, that will allow the water to roll back, and the supplies is going to deliver the water with a greater phase of velocity into the pipes, and which have more of junctions, and that is the main reason. If the pipes were built in such a way that you have 5 houses which are directly given from the supplier with a very low input phase of water being running in the pipe, then very few pipe leakages will happen. So I think that maybe the council or the water supplier should ensure themselves that the water should be released with a very slow pace, and the control should not be given to the householders, and they should only have a option of giving them only this amount of water is being consumed at the end of the day. Like you automatically block the water and you have the controller, and that's 5 of them are controlling at the same time, or at different times with the water roll back, and repeat as one particular problem. That is the main reason for your pipe leakages. And storage as well is like in few countries what we have here is some countries don't have a tank system as well, so it is directly given. And in some countries we have a tank system and the tank is being overflown. We have an underground tank in front of your gate or balcony, which is outside the garden down. And when that is being overflown, there is directly to your some tank which is inside, and that helps you to store your water, say like big old stuff down your tank which is overhead on your house. So there are few things that can be taken into consideration, that you have sums as well in countries where your water scarcity is there, so you want to prevent your water under the ground, you can even take back and reuse them.
Thank you so much. That's really interesting. I'm wondering if you thought of, instead of rainwater harvesting, or maybe in addition to, gray water recycling, and what made you go with rainwater harvesting?
Yes, so I've studied things sort of like gray water reuse. They even have systems where you can install something in your front yard where like the bacteria and algae and natural resources sort of clean the water and such. I just looked at rainwater from the aspect of Ireland having so much rainwater, experiencing it every day in my winter commutes to school. And the thing that's interesting, because it's like stormwater runoff and flooding and all that, obviously are important. And there are things that, as I carry on, I'm going to look into as well. But the thing is, that water generally is coming from the rainwater. Like the stormwater, what if we can catch a little bit higher? Reduce, I know that toilet water doesn't need to be treated, but if we were going to look at this from a showering perspective or something else like that, the gray water would have to be treated to a lesser degree, but there is some treatment that goes into it. So gray water reuse was something that I was actually also incorporating in, but that's the stuff that I'm going to do this summer, but the retrofit study, that's a very good one.
So we're almost out of time. One more question for me, if I can. So you're a scientist, but you're an engineer.
No, I'm an engineer.
Yeah. So I guess, but so you would maintain our engineers, not scientists.
It's a little tricky. So kind of like the way that artists use mediums, like paper and markers, we use math and science to solve our problems.
Yeah.
So a scientist will provide us the parameters that we need, like laws of gravity and physics and all that, and we take those and we apply them to real world situations.
Yeah, so I was struck by how you said you were going to engage in community engagement.
Yeah.
And mostly I talk to climate scientists, and of course they can do that as well. But generally, the model for a climate scientist is to just do the research and they can be very motivated to angle that research towards certain issues. They just do research and present it and don't get engaged. They have to maintain neutrality.
Yes.
Don't get engaged with the community in a very active way. Some of them do, of course, but often that can be frowned upon. But you seem to, an engineer is different than me.
Yes.
You feel more free to be hands-on.
I feel like, not in a negative standpoint, the scientist provides really fascinating information, and it's very fortunate that we can apply that. And as an engineer, I like solving problems. I like seeing change, making things happen. You know, someone could be highly intelligent, they could have an answer to something that can solve the world, but if you can't communicate that, if you can't explain it to someone, if you can't install it, it's just data. You need to do something with it. We have this potential to get these numbers and it proves it, but the next step, who is going to do that? Someone has to make a change and drive forward, so I'm
And lastly, have you tried talking to Irish Water?
Yes, actually, they had a consultation period in December, and I went to, was at a hotel, and I met with some engineering consultants who were responsible for the environmental impact assessment. They gave me a bunch of books, and we were discussing kind of for an hour, pros and cons, rainwater, different methods, and they do have an opinion where they think environmental sustainability is important, but ultimately they're a business, and businesses are founded on money, and I feel like at the end of the day, they kind of have this safe business view of we're going with what we know. You know, well, yeah, rainwater, that's all a good idea, but it can't work. It can't work. So my thesis is giving them the numbers to say, no, like, it will work. Don't be scared of the future. We can sort of do this together. So they're a little held back because they have their project. It took them years to construct. I've been on the phone with them. I sort of had to make little boards out of accounts to troll the internet and get information on water usage and talking to Irish Water in any way that I can. They have their project and they think that this is their idea and it's not as open. So I tried, but I think at this point I need to get either other companies involved or figureheads that have status and make enough noise about it to hopefully actually, if my thesis proves correct, get something done.
Okay. Any last questions from the audience? No? Well, we're out of time anyway, so I'll just say thank you very much to all the speakers. That was fascinating. I learned a lot. And well done. Okay, so.